Happy New Year, everyone. I know I'm late, but better late than never, right? It's been quite a hectic year so far. There's been so many world-changing events in 1 month. I truly believe nothing is off the table. I mean, 3 major events in 1 month that 20 years ago would have made it to the cover of the Times magazine are now seen as nothing more than footnotes next to the great big new leftist crusade. Apparently, Democrats in America have already moved on from the whole Palestine thing and climate change activism. The new zeitgeist has been decided by the masses, and they have declared that saving the poor illegal brown people is now the main priority. I gotta give it to them. First, they turn a bunch of fat black lesbians into millionaires by throwing money at Black Lives Matter without questioning where the funds were going. Then they turn every Muslim out there talking about Palestine into Islamist grifters. And now it's the turn of the illegals. And I can already see a bunch of celebrities milking this movement as much as they can. Truly, there's no end to stupidity in this day and age. So, with all of this in mind, I want to take my chances at creating my own predictions for 2026. But before I get into that, let's talk a little bit about the current state of the new year. We started quite strong with the US intervention in Venezuela, officially ending Maduro's communist regime. Personally, I spent the first few weeks of 2026 celebrating alongside the Venezuelan community in my area. Left or right wing, every Latino I know is over the moon about this, myself included. It was like a second Christmas. But of course, leftists in the US and Europe think they know better than Venezuelans themselves around the world or living in Venezuela. And they are more than willing to sacrifice millions of brown people on the altar of leftist ideology. The left wants Maduro back in power, and they are trying to throw the book at the Trump administration by labeling the intervention as an act of foreign invasion. Of course, this lasted a week, maybe 2 at most, and they've already moved on. No one on the left is talking about this anymore. None of them care at this point. Fuck, they never even cared in the first place. As long as they get to attack the Trump administration, the left will take any positions available, even if that means they have to support dictators. I'm glad Venezuelans were going out in the streets to counter-protest all of these morons. But now that Venezuela is finally on its way to gain freedom, the question remains, what will they do with that freedom? I'll talk more about that later. On the other hand, there's also the new Iranian revolution, where you have the Islamic regime under Ali Khamenei currently opening live fire ammunition against protesters. There's an estimate around 36,500 people dead as of January 25th, 2026, and still rising. Of course, you won't hear any support in the West because Western leftists, due to their support for Palestine, have already picked a side by default, the Muslim side. And surprise, surprise, most people in the Middle East fully endorse genocide against other Arabs as long as it's done in the name of preserving the Islamic State and going to a forever war against Israel. So leftists in the West are now stuck supporting an actual genocide because they didn't bother to investigate what actual Middle Eastern geopolitics are actually about. And some of them are slowly coming to the realization that perhaps they were actually supporting terrorist groups all along, and that they were being used by these religious extremist movements. You can't be a leftist in this current age and be taken seriously. These people are fucking mean, bro. But on a serious note, the whole situation over there is insane. The Iranian government has been using footage of actual dead civilians to discourage protesters from causing further disruption. Families recovering their relatives' bodies are being forced to pay compensation to the Iranian regime for the bullets that killed their relatives. So let's say you are a parent of a kid that got shot by the government, and then when you go to recover the body of your kid, of your child, the Islamic regime will make you pay a fine for the bullets that killed them, just to humiliate you further. There are also reports on the Iranian government hiring mercenaries in the form of jihadist terrorist groups like Hezbollah to conduct civilian massacres. And all of this madness in the name of anti-Westernization, or Gavzadegi in Persian. I'll get more into that later. Look, I am an anti-Westerner conservative thinker myself, or at least I like to think so, especially against Westernization in its current form, that is, the far woke left progressive movement. But if you gotta commit human right violations, Tiananmen Square style, on steroids, just to preserve your trad government, it's really not worth it. At that point, you've already lost the culture war. You have nearly 40,000 martyrs in Iran, 40,000 young men and women who will be forever remembered for giving up their lives for the future of their country. And then hundreds of thousands more injured that will live on to tell the tale. The Islamic regime will never bury this away through censorship alone. We're not living in the 60s or 70s anymore. The historical memory from this event will be forever engraved in people's minds. It's too late already. A regime change and the failure that is an Islamic republic is self-evident at this point. And finally, at the end of January or beginning of February, depending on how you look at it, we have the fall of China's most precious general, Zhang Youqia. The reason why the arrest of this man is massively important is because it marks the point of no return for the CCP and the Xi Jinping faction. You see, General Zhang is not only one of the most significant generals in China's army due to his position, he's also one of the few remaining generals with actual combat experience. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, Zhang actually fought in the Vietnam War, gaining medals and promotions due to his successful performance. Also, General Zhang's father and Xi Jinping's father fought together during the Chinese Civil War. So the two men have been friends since childhood, with Xi Jinping going as far as calling Zhang Youqia his elder brother. So the fact that this man, with such a high rank and entrusted position within the Xi clan, got arrested marks a turning point in today's China. Most people are calling and cheering for the collapse of the CCP regime, myself included, but trust me, this is far from the truth. Xi Jinping and the CCP already know what's coming for them in the future. Demographic collapse and a failing economy. The old tactics of the past don't work as well as they used to. The Chinese youth of today don't live with as much fear as previous generations did. Yeah, they will show respect and modesty in public, but behind closed doors and with the safety of online anonymity. The Chinese millennial and Zoomer will be extremely critical of the CCP, at least those living in China. These are all signs of an impending new revolution. And the CCP and Xi Jinping know this. They are paranoid about this. And they are making moves to prepare themselves for a collapse by doubling down on authoritarianism. Right now, the current narrative is that China has the world's biggest military, the second largest population, and they are dominating international markets with Temu and Alibaba. They are an emerging economy, founding fathers of the BRICS, sticking it out to the man. Apparently, they are also cracking on quantum computing and leading the world on AI research and all this stuff. So on paper, they are doing everything right and we're all garbage next to them. The future is China. China number one. And once we reach that future, we will all beg them to let us in the same way sinners beg to be let inside Noah's Ark right before the flood. All of this is important to mention because it's all bullshit. China does not have 1.2 billion citizens. Considering the one-child policy from the 80s that ran all the way until 2016, and the current state of Chinese youth with the laying down movement where nobody wants to have kids or even get a job in the current economy. 1.2 billion people is a stupid claim. I've read sources where the number is actually around 400 million, and that's being generous. In reality, China is going through a massive population crisis, worse than Europe and potentially on the same level as Japan. They definitely don't have 200 million soldiers in reserve as they claim. To field that many soldiers, they have to tank their economy because there's just no possible logistics or equipment to train that many men. Also, they tank every other industry because they will be robbing them of essential workers. And we're talking about young men that are willing to work and work for the government, which is something most Chinese parents will advise against, behind closed doors, of course. So what does China have left? They dominate the rare mineral market. You want a battery? It'll be from China. But they'll even lose that market because every country is investing heavily on finding other alternatives, either by producing locally, investing in new technologies, or on alternatives such as recycling or substitution tech. Let's not even mention how they've been destroying their environment through intensive mining in an effort to keep dominance on the market. And their efforts to counter their own kind of environmental collapse is only changing their local weather, which in return is changing the weather for the rest of the world. China truly does not give a single fuck. So long as they get to lead the race, they are more than willing to sacrifice the rest of the world. This all leads to one conclusion. Xi Jinping and the CCP need a new strategy if they wish to remain in power. So if your narratives and economy collapses, and the future that was promised to you barely 10 years ago starts fading away, what do you have left if you're China? Well, the oppressive boot. Like I said before, they have to double down on oppression, authoritarianism. You see, it doesn't matter whether everything they say is full of crap. What matters is that everybody believes it. And if the world doesn't believe it anymore, what matters then is that the Chinese people believe it. And that's what they are cracking down on. Right now, the Chinese Communist Party is going through a massive purge of anyone that is capable or critical of the current regime because they are afraid such a person will gain too much popularity and kickstart a new revolution, which, funnily enough, it's the same pattern that led to the collapse of the Ming dynasty. So they are forced to enter into the classic paradox of control, where you get to remove intelligent and capable people because they are a threat. But once you get rid of all those people, all you're left with is incompetence. And that is what Xi Jinping and the CCP are doubling down on. Their final gambit. They are getting ready to enter this period of massive but slow depression, financial and social. And their way to survive will be through total annihilation of individuality, or what is known as the atomization of the individual. They hope that by oppressing every element of the population, Whether it's the average citizen or the government bootlicker, everybody must be oppressed and bullied. Everybody except the forces in power, that is the police and the military. As long as you keep the watchmen fed and well paid, nothing will collapse, at least for a while. All of these events draw a massive parallel between the first world and the third world at the start of 2026. These massive worldly events will keep happening with more and more frequency and succession. And you will be convinced into thinking that none of this matters because what's really important is who you fucking vote every 4 years. Humanitarian crisis will keep dropping on you with more and more intensity. Footage of people starving, or more recently, people thirsting to death, will be thrown around to convince you that the only solution is to drop your borders and turn your countries into one massive haven for the whole world at your own expense. And what's more important, none of it will work because it's simply not working right now. It's been failing for at least 10 years at this point. The experiment of multiculturalism has already failed us, but you will be convinced time and time again that that's the only solution because of sad people on TV or social media. So basically, Western powers are just as deluded as China, but just on the opposite end of the street. The West will not atomize the individual in the same manner as the East, that is through open systemic oppression, but they will make it irrelevant through broad generic laws and policies and unsustainable migration. And make no mistake, this is done for the exact same purpose as the CCP, to maintain control at the top while everything else at the bottom falls apart. Also, it's important to notice how it's quite paradoxical how in the West, people are unhappy because they are going through too much change, and then in other parts of the world, people are unhappy because there's no change at all. The West is going backwards through progressivism, while the rest of the world wants to go forwards through conservatism. The only thing both sides have in common is how they are mythologizing the end result. The progressives believe that they will achieve utopia by forcing change, equality, and socialism in one form or another, while the conservatives believe they will get rid of all evils in the world once they destroy far leftist ideology. In the case of Venezuela, for example, that will be getting rid of communism and socialism forever, while in Iran, people are protesting against the Islamic regime by encouraging for the return of Pahlavi, that is the old Iranian monarchy. And in China, the youth are protesting against progress by choosing to not move forward at all. Staying put in one place is their method of resistance. Personally, I believe the truth lies somewhere in the uncomfortable middle ground. But the end results will be on opposite sides of each other. We will see the rise of authoritarianism in the West through Islam and socialism, mainly because Islamic authoritarianism always shows up hand in hand with the far left. And that's what's going on in Europe, and most likely soon in the US too. While liberalism will be introduced in the rest of the world through the influence of all Western conservative ideals and values. It's wild to consider such things could happen, but that's what it looks like today at the start of 2026, in my opinion. So, in other words, nothing is off the table. With this in mind, let's play some bets. Number 1. Palestine will become a communist state. Looking at the current political climate between Israel and Palestine, I think it's quite evident that sooner or later those two hellholes will reach a final solution of sorts. That is the two-state solution. The whole Western world will celebrate. They'll probably try to make it a national holiday wherever there is a higher number of morons. But these morons will be the ones that influence what kind of state Palestine will be and how it will be run. You can already see influencers on TikTok starting businesses in Palestine, only to fail in a month because capitalism is evil, of course.
Hey guys, my name is Zikra. I spent most of my life in America and I decided to try living in Palestine, and I opened my dream cafe, Art Cafe Ramallah. I opened the cafe on June 10 of last year, and I closed the cafe on November 30th, 2025. Unfortunately, I had to close my cafe because I got scammed and I lost all of my life savings and every single penny that I made from the shop during the 6 months of operation.
No relation to local Palestinian culture. So their popular solution will be to rebuild Palestine with a more European socialist mindset. But how could that even be possible? Leftist ideology in the Middle East? Well, if I told you historically Islam and communism have a lot of things in common, you probably wouldn't believe me. After all, what could be more far-right or regressive than Sharia law? But the truth is, in the modern world, the alliance between the Greens and the Reds has always been quite common. They need each other to fight against Western liberalism and Western values to then spread their own respective ideologies. But of course, in the end, they always backstab each other. It's a long story, but let's make it quick. Let's go back to the beginning of the 20th century. The Bolsheviks are trying to take over Russia with a heavy anti-imperialist message. So they go around instigating revolts among minority, ethnic and or religious groups. Among them, the Muslims. It took a few decades to really spread around, but around the 1940s, an Iranian philosopher, Ahmad Fardid, coined the term Garbzadegi, meaning a loss of cultural identity through a fascination of Western consumerist values. You can translate this word to Westoxification. The end of World War II marks the most important years for the spread of communism and Marxism theory around the world. One of the most critical places, perhaps for its location, the Middle East. Regions across this area begin to go through radical social reforms influenced by Leninism and Marxism. In particular, Egypt and Iran start seeing more and more social pressure to escape this Westoxify cultural change that at that point seemed quite inevitable. Communism gave the people a sense of duty to stand up against cultural takeovers by Western empires. So in Egypt, Sayyid Qutb, the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, applies what could be called Islamic Leninism. And later in Iran, Ali Shariati popularizes ideas rooted in Marxism for an Islamic national identity. These two men are neither left or right-wing in a popular sense, in a modern sense, but they lean on these ideologies to create a new stance for the Muslim world. Also, because they just know their cultures are fading away from Western influence, so they decide the solution is to root every aspect of society in Islam. Qutb in Egypt declares the age of Jahiliyyah, which means the age of ignorance that is attributed to the period before the Quran was revealed to Muhammad, and wants a pure version of Islam in every aspect of society, politics, culture, everything, at any cost, even if it's imposed on the people by the government. And then in Iran, Shariati, along with the Iranian National Front, pushes for Red Shiism, which is like a classless, governless version of an Islamic Marxist republic that will only work if everybody just turned into a weird mix of a Muslim and Marxist. So, in the end, of course, both of these men get executed and assassinated for their radical ideas. Nonetheless, their legacy still remains in these parts of the world to this day, whether people know it or not. On one hand, Qutb sowed the seeds of jihadist Islam. So, if you see any Islamic terrorist groups today claiming to fight against imperialism, you can thank Qutb for it. And then Shariati left us with a version of Islam that's just way too communist, too far left for any Islamic society. Don't get me wrong, it was tolerated at the time by Muslims because Shariati's ideals were pro-Islam and helped fight against the Shahs, that is the Iranian monarchy. But then those same leftist ideals were betrayed by the same Islamist revolutionaries he helped to popularize, essentially handing over the country on a plate to Islamist theocrats, which still rule Iran to this day with an iron fist. The cultural revolution in Iran from the early 80s that followed the Islamic Revolution was basically McCarthyism on steroids. The new Islamist regime shows up and purges all leftist influence from every aspect of life and academia. Arrests, executions, kidnappings. In the end, all Shariati helped to achieve with his Marxist Islamic ideology was a massive purge that led to thousands of students, teachers, and thinkers that were pushing for a leftist awakening to die like dogs. And this is the lesson we have to take into account. Islam and the left will always walk next to each other with a revolutionary spirit to fight against traditional values, Western values. But in the end, they'll just go to war with each other. So if you live in a Western country and you see Muslims voting for the left, this is what's coming for you. This is your future. And I don't mind spoiling it. Muslims always win. And that's because leftists always fucking lose. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Leftists don't know how to fight in a fair fight. These Muslim influencers you see in America pushing for the Democratic Party, this is what they're doing. Knowingly or not, this is what their plans leads to. And if they don't know, if they really mean what they say they believe, that is leftist ideology, then it's even worse. Their ignorance will get them and everybody else killed. Just like in the Iranian Cultural Revolution, they will be purged for pushing for this new leftist version of Islam they like promoting in the West. And they will probably get it, for a short while at least. The first Muslim socialist state in Palestine, with another cultural revolution around the corner. That is the future. Which leads me to my next point. More white people will turn to Islam, specifically white women, and they will break it.
If you are a Muslim who is transphobic and homophobic, not only are you contributing to the mass killing of LGBTQ people, you are also contributing to the Muslim genocide by giving ammunition to Zionists and other Islamophobes, violently killing Muslims around the world. And y'all could argue until your faces are blue in the comments about if it's haram or not. I literally don't care. You are meant to love people, respect, and show kindness to people. If your version of religion has to do with being a bigot that gets people killed, not hurting anyone, just being who they are, I don't want any part of it. You are also pushing away people who are trans, who are gay, from becoming Muslim. Whether you like it or not, there are LGBTQ Muslims who are part of our ummah. They are just as Muslim as you are. And at the end of the day, subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah. Allah is greatest, Allah knows best, and you need to humble yourself.
The biggest mistake of the West is the idea that Islam is compatible with Western liberal values. I'm not saying this out of personal belief. It is possible in theory, but you'd get yourself killed if you tried because it goes against Islamic values. I just went through 70 years of Arabic history for you to prove this point. Islamic fundamentalists will reject non-Quranic law, always. But if you don't believe me, you can check what's going on in Iran right now. and tell me whether you're willing to die for the liberal dream like the young people in Iran are doing right now. And if you say yes, and you're feeling that confident, then go ahead. Go to Iran right now and see how well you can protest against live rounds. And all these Palestine supporters going completely quiet about what's going on in Iran because they find themselves in an awkward position. They spent the past year or so defending radical Islam in Palestine. And now that radical Islam is killing Arabs, they can't say a word. 2026 truly marks the age of hypocrisy. Which brings me to my next point. 2026 will be the last year of traditional woke leftism and politics. You can already see these ideas be less and less present in public media, like movies or TV shows. Not entirely, of course. There are still scars of wokeness almost everywhere you look, but the change is there. The left is starting to feel the headache that comes from holding too many contradicting points. And that's the price you're gonna pay when you wanna solve every single international social and cultural issue without being informed on what they are actually about in the first place. When you rally behind people from widely different backgrounds and cultures, you're either gonna have to be really well informed to a level where you're gonna have to spend half a lifetime living inside that particular culture, or operate almost entirely on sheer faith that those causes you're championing for actually align with your personal Western ideals. And this is what these morons are actually doing. They are the ultimate fucking tool. They operate on pure belief and on bullshit narratives until reality hits them in the face. And that's my next point. Neo-Marxism will be reborn again. But this time as a proper religion. How can a movement that's failed so many times in so many different cultures and different periods be so insistent on we just didn't get it right? The answer is simple. These people, these neo-Marxists, are experiencing nothing short of a religious psychosis. You see, in the same way Protestants pretend to speak in tongues or Catholics claim to be demon-possessed, these Marxists truly believe in the coming of the Marxist plan on earth, that one day, once everybody is finally educated, as in indoctrinated, and everyone just simply believes, everything will just work. That's their faith. It's the same pattern as a cult. Nothing can stop these people from believing this stuff. They will appeal to the state of nature and the individual. They will claim countries such as China aren't truly communists, or witch hunt each other for not being communist enough. These are all signs of religious dogma. Perfection with nature, paradise, was achieved a long time ago, and we fell from it due to the original sin, that is, capitalism. And now we must repent and struggle to get back to it. Or how about the argument of, you see that institution over there? Not my kind of communism. I must go and start my own movement. No one understands Marxism like I or my group of friends do. And finally, there's the pursuit of Puritanism. We gotta police each other out to see who truly believes and who doesn't. Because unless all our collective understanding isn't aligned, we will fall back into sin. That is capitalism, the ultimate cause for all our struggles. If we all just believe in communism, it will just naturally happen. Peace on earth. Yeah, sure. Just give me your pamphlet and leave me the fuck alone, you lunatics. Anyway, next point. We will see the first few mainstream transhuman concepts. Dating AI, uploading your consciousness to AI, or trying to apply some kind of universal basic income through AI. The first point is pretty simple because it's already happening. People were already dating public AI such as ChatGPT, and then after an update, the machine refused to keep up with their delusion. The result was a considerable amount of people on Reddit ending up heartbroken and depressed. You could argue another result is the highlight of how egotistical the average person is. That when they say they want a relationship, they are in fact just looking for a slave. Someone that dedicates all their time and energy to satisfy them. There's already a ton of AI companies designing the AI precisely for that experience. I mean, the whole concept of dating simulators already exists in gaming. It originated in Japan, and the whole point of these games is you, the main character, have a set of girls and they all into you, and your goal is to figure out which option or which thing you have to say to get in their pants, basically. So now we look at the world of gacha gaming, and it's basically that. These games are just dating simulators, and imagine if you introduce AI, people no longer have to wait for updates or for the voice actors to record new lines and be updated every few years into a game. Now you can just use AI and have the AI adopt the personality of these characters. And boom, just like that, now you have a virtual girlfriend or boyfriend that are part of these great narratives, of these great fictional stories. And they are into everything that you're into about these stories or about this lore or fictional world. And they are all over you. Now imagine how can the average female flesh and bones compete against this? It's impossible. This is the ultimate product. This is horrible just thinking about it, but it looks like things are heading that way. These cheap virtual girlfriend AIs that are floating all over the place, these are just the testing grounds for what's to come. And I will bet they will probably start with free trials and then move on to paid subscription plans that increase in price the longer you stay hooked up to the thing. The other point about universal basic income through AI will most likely be something that will start in Europe, because these retards will never stop chasing for the socialist utopia. This time is quite different. I think the concept of UBI will be revived by both sides of the European left and right for a simple fact. AI capabilities are advancing way too fast, and unemployment in Europe is through the roof without any signs of reversal. I think this time the concept of UBI will be thrown around as an inevitable outcome of technological advancement. But this is the European Union. There is no way they're just gonna give you the money every month and walk away. They will ask you for something in return. Don't commit crimes, stay out of trouble, reasonable stuff, right? That is until they keep squeezing this idea by the balls, as they always do with anything that's involved in regulation. And they'll start upping the ante. Don't drink too much, don't smoke too much, don't say mean things on the internet, or else we cut off your UBI benefits. And if you don't like it, get a job. This is it. This is the future. This is what other countries are seeing happening in the West, and they are quickly saying, fuck no. You know, I've talked a lot about China and Iran, but not too much about Venezuela, even though I'm from South America. China is in the shit. Iran is going through shit, and Venezuela just got out of the shit. So there's not much to say about them that's useful right now in their situation. The communist regime in Venezuela is doing their best to keep up appearances, but the more time moves on, the worse it gets for them to control any sense of stability. I will think they're hoping Maduro will be set free due to some bullshit UN law, but the Americans won't play those games. And so they will keep praying until they have no other choice but to face reality and free Venezuela once and for all. Problem is, there wasn't a real revolution. So Venezuelans didn't fight or suffer for the freedom they got. They just got it. And yes, there's a point to be made about all the Venezuelans that fled the country over the years or were arrested and persecuted, but these are older generations. The Gen Z Venezuelans have, for the most part, gone through none of this stuff because they were too young to remember, and by the time they were old enough, they had already spent over half a lifetime abroad, most likely in the US. So the only thing older Venezuelans have that is worth passing down to the newer generations as a myth is almost 30 years worth of broken dreams that they now want to see realized. But that's the actual problem. Once you obtain freedom, what do you do with it? That is something they'll have to answer very soon, and I just think they don't have much to offer. Cubans fought and died for their own communist revolution, and once they got it, they never let it go. And why would they? They bled for it. They sacrificed everything for it. Even if the communist dream failed them in the end, they can only double down because that's their myth. They defeated the evil American imperialism and raised a country. On the other hand, Venezuelans have none of this stuff, so things can go in any direction. Even if the older generation is very much against anything leaning on the left, I think sooner or later, Venezuela will become leftist again. But before that happens, we will see more left-leaning or center-left parties running for office in the future in Venezuela. And I think they will do pretty well because they will lean on the Western model of a capitalist nation with social welfare, and in 20 or 30 years, they will end up in the exact same spot they were 20 or 30 years ago. History likes to rhyme like that. And speaking of history, I think racial tensions in the West, particularly in America, will reach a new boiling point. The left and the right in the US have distanced themselves so far from each other. It's evident that we have to look at these two groups as almost completely different ethnicities. The left hyper-focuses on any racial issues and inequality of all sorts, but they are ready to drop their suicidal empathy if you're a minority that does not support their cause. If we remember the Antifa rioters from some years ago, their tactics, their way of indoctrination, their way of organizing is no longer something to be considered far left or exclusively Antifa. This is the new left in 2026. Their methods are now widely used by people of all ages or social class, meaning children, old women, and they'll recruit these groups in their own home turf, meaning schools, suburban neighborhoods. It doesn't really matter where or how, as long as it's a democratic run state. This widespread method of rioting by putting everything on the line, including their own lives, will be the norm. As I mentioned earlier, these leftist groups are acting like a religious group. They are spreading their reach and influence in America in the same way Christians spread their influence in Rome through martyrism. They are targeting groups that are persecuted or in distress to signal to the public, look at us, we are the party of the inferior. We will die to defend what we believe in. It's the same method. Ideas spread through the blood of martyrs. They don't care if they end up defending actual criminals or if they sacrifice themselves and society. What matters is defending their belief. For years, you've had mofos like me warning people that the further you go to the left, the further you get into communism, the closer you will get to religion. And this is it. It's right here. What other proof do you need? In conclusion, 2026 certainly began with a boom of happenings left and right, up and down, but the year is still young. February so far has been dedicated almost entirely to the Epstein lease scandal, with every social group already grifting on it so far, whether it's Muslims, feminists, or leftists, or even the right. Everyone is just using old Jeffrey to throw shit on each other. The Muslims will say, see, It's all Christians and Jews on the island. There were no Muslims on the Epstein list. And next thing you know, more files of evidence get released, and it turns out there are hundreds of Muslims on it. Feminists and leftists will run around with the same argument. And then they will find people of their group in the fucking list and then pretend that wasn't their argument in the first place. But my favorite, most retarded take of 2026 has to be from the groups of leftists that go around spreading the slogan, there are no illegal immigrants on the Epstein list. Because grooming children or little girls only matters when it's happening on an island in the Caribbean. If it happens in the UK or Europe, the left won't give a shit. They will even defend it and cover it up. What a time to be alive. What a year this is gonna be. Anyway, thanks for listening. Bye.